watching Primetime. I'm Tamanna Inamdar.
And my name is Ayush Alavadi. Let's have a look at the day's top stories. Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un announced a deal that's short on details. The US and North Korea agree to seek complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula, but there's no deadline.
Consumer price inflation rises to a 4-month high of 4.87% in May. Industrial output growth also rises to 4.9% in April.
The government is taking another shot at privatizing Air India. DEA Secretary Subhash Garg says the government could even consider selling 100% in the national carrier to attract buyers.
Indian markets end at a 4-month high. Nifty gains 60 points as heavyweights like RIL and SBI rally.
Arvind Kejriwal continues his sit-in at the LG's office while his minister goes on a hunger strike after the LG refuses to meet their demands.
Well, but the big story globally has been the historic meeting between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, which ended with a lot of promises but was short on details. The two nations vowed to embark on a path of peace, with North Korea agreeing to full denuclearization of the Korean peninsula in return for economic relief. The two leaders signed a 2-page document. However, no deadline was set to achieve these goals. Here's a quick look at the top takeaways from the summit in Singapore.
I want to thank Chairman Kim for taking the first bold step toward a bright new future for his people. Our unprecedented meeting, the first between an American president and a leader of North Korea, proves that real change is indeed possible. We're prepared to start a new history, and we're ready to write a new chapter between our nations.
All right, some big announcements from that meeting. But what can we look forward to in the coming days? Bloomberg's Kevin Cirilli files this report from Singapore.
President Trump says he's been able to secure a path to denuclearization with North Korea. Speaking after a one-day summit with North Korea Chairman Kim Jong-un, President Trump said at a more than hour-long press conference that he believes Kim Jong-un will ultimately decide to withdraw his weapons program. That said, critics are already suggesting that North Korea Chairman Kim Jong-un had already committed to doing as much, and that there's no real concrete plan to verify that North Korea will in fact denuclearize. President Trump says otherwise. His Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, set to visit Seoul, South Korea, as well as Japan, to continue to lay out the case of America's new foreign policy with North Korea. Meanwhile, all of the administration is set to huddle next week in Washington. President Trump already embarking on his return trip home. Reporting from Singapore, Kevin Cirilli, Bloomberg News.
Now, Trump and Kim signed off on a lot of promises, but what's next? How historic and significant is this meet? And really the big question, who's come out the real winner? Is it Donald Trump or is it Kim Jong-un? To speak more on this, I'm joined now by Meera Shankar, former Indian ambassador to the United States, and Raj Bhala, professor at the University of Kansas. Thank you so much for speaking with us. To both of you, Ms. Shankar, I'll start with you because, you know, if you look at the hour-long press conference that President Trump held after the meet, and he was in a really good mood. He felt like he had really achieved something. But let's come down to brass tacks. Has he walked away with enough?
Well, I think, you know, the summit statement basically is a very broad brush statement with general commitments. The significance of the meeting perhaps lies in the fact that this is the first time a U.S. president is meeting a North Korean leader, and the fact that President Trump has really adopted a more flexible approach rather than insisting on upfront, you know, achievements with regard to dismantlement of North Korea's nuclear program before a summit meeting. He agreed to a summit meeting to kickstart. So in a sense, it's a different approach from the approach the U.S. has followed in the past. Will it actually yield the desired results? I think we have to wait and see, because these commitments are very general. There is no clear sense of what both sides mean when they talk of denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Does it include U.S. forces and nuclear weapons in South Korea and the U.S. extended nuclear deterrence provided to South Korea? If so, then this will be seen as another signal of the U.S. walking away from Asia. You know, they first pulled out of the TPP. Now, if they actually walk away from extended deterrence to their allies in Asia, vis-a-vis both China and North Korea, then I think there's a question mark about what the future role of the U.S. in Asia will be. On the other hand, is it only dismantlement of North Korea's nuclear weapons? Is that the understanding? I think that is something which has to unfold over the coming days as follow-on negotiations are held. Also, you know, what are the security guarantees that the U.S. will offer to North Korea? Because President Trump in his press conference has talked of also already suspending U.S.-South Korea exercises. He called them provocative war games, and said that he would like to see the withdrawal of U.S. troops from South Korea. So I think this caught the South Koreans a bit off guard, because it didn't appear to have been discussed with them in advance. So I think it's very much historic in the sense of being the first meeting between a North Korean leader and U.S. president. What it will actually achieve remains to be seen, because it's a very broad brush joint statement and details have still to be worked out.
You know, President Trump did also say that he was asked the question saying that how do you know, Kim will keep up his part of the promise. He said, you know, you can't tell about anyone. But I want to ask Raj Bhala about that word, Korean Peninsula, which is in the joint statement. And that really is the tricky one, isn't it? That a lot of diplomats are going to be poring over to see what it really effectively means. On the other hand, Trump has shown a keenness of getting out of, the South Korean protection responsibilities that the United States has. He's talked about the cost of moving people from Guam, etc. Do you think it's essentially heading there?
Well, it's difficult to say, and I would agree with everything that the ambassador said. We don't know whether this is much ado about nothing. The 4-paragraph document is nothing more than an aspirational letter of intent. It is not a treaty. It has no binding language, with one narrow exception that I'll mention. It creates no hard law obligations. It's what we international lawyers would say is the softest of soft law. There are no dispute resolution mechanisms. Now, on the one hand, as the ambassador quite rightly pointed out, it is a positive development that we have moved from July 2007, when then candidate Barack Obama raised the possibility of meeting with the North Korean and other leaders, Cuba and Iran. And he was lambasted for that by both conservatives and including by Hillary Clinton, who said that was irresponsible and frankly naive. It's a positive development that we've got two leaders meeting, though it is puzzling to note that it is easier to meet for some reason with the North Korean leader than with the leader in Iran. And it's also puzzling to note that it's easier to get a document agreed with the North Korean leader than it is with our G7 partners. That said, the four paragraphs, again, are very, very loosely worded. The first one is nothing more than an aspirational statement of intent for peace. The second talks about joint efforts, again, to build peace on the Korean Peninsula, as you quite rightly point out. The third one is the one that much of the world's attention has gone to, which is the commitment by the DPRK, North Korea, to, quote, work toward complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Well, work toward creates no hard law obligations. What does that mean? A reporting requirement? Does it mean allowing IAEA inspectors? Keep in mind that on that kind of issue, we had a 159-page detailed Iran nuclear deal that addressed what it meant for Iran to work toward. And then finally, the important, though narrow, hard law obligation is that the North Koreans agree to return immediately the remains that have been identified of all POW and MIA from the Korean War. Even that is not the best worded, because are we talking POW and MIA remains of only U.S. troops, or would it be of all troops who fought bravely and lost their lives in Korea? So we have to remain positive and hope that these soft law obligations will be turned into hard law ones, but we don't know.
Right, Mr. Bhala, and your point taken that perhaps that statement has led to a lot of ambiguity, perhaps the fact that it has been loosely worded and a lot of it is a reaffirmation of things from the past. But I wanted to get your take on Donald Trump and Team Trump's, narrative, and essentially the fact that they still seem to suggest that the maximum pressure campaign is what seems to have worked in a situation like this to get Kim to the table and sign off on this. How would the international community be looking at this, considering that, Trump still seems to project this as a big victory when it comes to him persuading Kim to come to the table?
Well, two points on that. The sanctions regime did not start with the current president. Those sanctions have been in place and have been tightened over many years. So I don't know that any one leader can take credit for it. And also the quality and nature of the sanctions in terms of bringing another country, whether it's Iran or North Korea, to the table is done with partners. It's done on a multilateral basis. So I would say that's true that sanctions have worked, have helped to bring these countries to the table. But I think we should be both humble and honest about how they work in coordination with others, and that it takes a long time for them to work.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Bhala and Meera Shankar, for joining us to dissect what's really going to come out of it. Like most geopolitical diplomatic photo ops, I guess, it's just a start. The devil is in the details. Time for some macro news. A week after the RBI cut interest rates by 25 basis points, consumer price inflation rose to a 4-month high in May. Industrial output growth, on the other hand, rose marginally in April. Ira Dugal sums up all the macro data.
The monthly economic data has thrown up no surprises, both on inflation and on the industrial growth front. In a month where we've seen the first rate hike in nearly 4 years, perhaps we should start with the inflation picture. The consumer price inflation index came in at 4.87% compared to 4.58% in April. This 4.87% is more or less what Bloomberg forecast had suggested. It's also in line with the RBI's own forecast. They are expecting inflation to stay close to 4.8 to 4.9% in the first half of the year. So this index level seems to suggest that it's going as per plan. Let's talk a little bit about core inflation, though, and the core inflation, which economists are now watching, which strips out not just volatile food and energy, but also items like transportation, which get impacted by some of those volatile energy prices. If you take that core inflation, that continues to be elevated at 6.17% based on the calculations of India Ratings. So essentially, it is telling you that there is some sort of underlying inflation pressure that is building up, even though you haven't seen dramatic strength in growth. And we'll get to that in a minute. If you're looking at the internals of the inflation number, within the food category, there is relatively elevated inflation in the fruit side and on vegetables. Fruit inflation at about 12%, vegetable inflation at about 8%. Some amount of it could be linked to summer impact. There have been some supply disruptions as well, which could continue to play a part in the May and in the June numbers. On the flip side, you continue to see deflationary pressures in the pulses segment and also in sugar, where prices are slipping right now. Fuel and light inflation at about 5.8%. That, of course, moves in line with what's been happening globally on crude oil prices. So that's broadly the inflation picture, not throwing up anything that makes you question what the MPC did, which is raise rates by 25 basis points. If you move to the industrial output numbers, not very strong, 4.9% industrial growth in the month of April. Within that, mining saw about 5%, manufacturing about 5%, and electricity was weak at about 2% growth. Fairly comsa in terms of the number of industries that grew and the ones that degrew. 16 out of 23 industries in the manufacturing segment showed a positive growth. The good news is that whole capital goods, CapEx story seems to be consistent with the data releases. So you've seen 13% growth in capital goods. You've seen 7.5% growth in the infrastructure construction category. So that's good news. If you're looking at the consumption side, consumer durable growth was at 4.3% and non-durable growth was at about 7% or so. Just mentioning two individual industries which have shown one very positive growth and one negative. One is the commercial vehicle sector, which saw more than 90% growth in this month. I don't know if there's a base effect built in. There probably is, but it is, again, consistent with the fact that there is activity happening in mining. There is activity happening in terms of some slight capex, all of which would mean strong demand for commercial vehicles. And then on the flip side, you've seen sharp degrowth in the jewelry segment, and a lot of people continue to blame that on what happened with the Nirav Modi episode and the impact that has had on the gems and jewelry segment.
All right, to take this story further, we're joined by Aditi Nair, Principal Economist at ICRA. She joins us to talk about these numbers. Aditi, thanks so much for speaking to us on Bloomberg Quint. What do you make of these numbers? Because it seems like, considering this has come in light of what happened with the Reserve Bank hiking their benchmark interest rates for the first time in 4 years, it's a significant development?
See, both the CPI and the IIP numbers have come in exactly in line with what we were expecting. So there are no surprises as such that the data today have shown up. And the RBI move last week was definitely preempting the fact that CPI inflation was expected to inch up in May. And we are expecting it to go up further next month to around 5.2% or so, after which we should see a base effect-led decline in the subsequent months. Having said that, obviously, one concerning factor is the extent of the uptick in core inflation, which you just mentioned. And that is something that we need to be very watchful of. Other than that, we are seeing a seasonal uptick in food inflation. We are seeing higher crude oil prices moving into the numbers for both fuel and light in terms of LPG, coal, other fuels, as well as for the transport and communication subsector of miscellaneous items. Now, of course, going forward, we have to watch and see to what extent we have a normal progress of the monsoon. How much do the minimum support prices for crops get revised? Where do crude oil prices and the rupee end up over the next few months? And really, what is the level of fiscal risk coming in from additional expenditure announcements that we get from the state governments, which we've seen a number of over the last couple of weeks as well. So all of this will really drive the inflation trajectory going forward and also then influence whether there are more rate hikes in store.
Okay, let's take a look at the IIP, boosted largely by the manufacturing sector growth. Aditi, some optimistic uptick there at 5.2 compared with 4.4 in March.
Absolutely. We were expecting both manufacturing and mining to show an uptick in this month, and that's what the initial numbers have shown us. And when we break down the manufacturing sector, there is one big rebound that we got in the capital goods sector based on a favorable base effect. So that's a positive. And like you mentioned, commercial vehicles definitely is a source of driving that high growth in April 2018. On the other hand, we got good numbers from both the infrastructure construction side and from non-durables, which has benefited from the high growth in cement and in sugar. So we had very high production in the month of April in the sugar sector, contrary to what had been the trend in the last couple of years. So this is really something that has driven the non-durable side. However, on the other hand, when you look at primary goods, intermediate goods and consumer durables, the growth has been modest to muted for these three sectors. So the underlying trends are not very even as far as the use-based classification is concerned. We do have a very mixed trend coming out from the use-based classification.
All right, Aditi, thanks so much for joining us and sharing that analysis. Now, moving on, after seeing its first attempt at selling Air India fail, the government is ready to re-examine its privatization process. Vrishti Beniwal from Bloomberg reports.
India will revive sale of its loss-making airline, Air India, after the sale flopped last month. Economic Affairs Secretary Subhash Garg spoke to Bloomberg News and he told us all options are on table. The government is ready to re-examine the privatization process and it is also re-looking at the clause which said government will retain 24% stake in Air India. Mr. Garg is telling us apparently this was the clause that put off some of the investors and that's why not a single bid was received for Air India. So what he is telling us, I quote, a certain kind of strategy was offered and that didn't find many takers and therefore something different will have to be done. There is no fixed objective that government should have 24%. It can be re-examined. So very soon we may have a revised process for Air India sale.
Okay, now what does it can be re-examined mean? That is the big question because as of now we're kind of reading between the lines. The government asked to keep 24%. That option was not viable for prospective buyers. Aviation expert Amrit Pandurangi is joining us now to talk more on that. Welcome Amrit, glad to speak to you again. Do you think re-examine could possibly mean the government willing to sell all of it and stay out?
I am not 100% sure of that. There is a possibility that government will reduce it from 24% to either a small percentage like under 10%, or maybe even for what is called the golden share concept, where basically it will just have one share, but it will have certain powers which will be specified in the bid document, hopefully. And that may give greater comfort than the present situation as far as the potential bidders is concerned. Whether it will make them come forward and bid for it or not is yet to be seen, because while 24% is a key reason why some of them stayed back, that is not perhaps the only reason. And so what other changes the government is willing to make after discussions with the potential bidders will really determine whether they will come forward with even a golden share kind of a concept.
Mr. Pandurangi, you mentioned there are other things that could make this whole deal a lot more interesting or appealing to potential bidders. This seemed to be, from the narrative earlier, the biggest roadblock. The fact that the government holds on to a certain percentage of it. If the government is amenable to really letting it go and offering 100% sale, what are the other things that you as an aviation expert could attribute perhaps to making this a successful sale?
I think the strong points of Air India are the excellent bilaterals and the slots, as also some amount of network reach that they have. Now, they need to make it, they means the government needs to make it very clear that these will continue to the new private investor or the player without any dilution or without any interference or without even government saying that we will assure you, but we will negotiate all these forward on your behalf. So I think that assurance or that all these trends will continue is important. Also important are two other issues. One is, of course, the labor people and the cost of carrying the people for what period of time, what happens to their costs and so on needs to be clarified at this point in time and not at a much later RFP, as the government would always say. And of course, they have to make it much more clearer about how much financial burden needs to be taken by the private investor. If these are clarified favorably to the private investor, I think that the chances of a dilution from 24% to a much smaller or golden share, plus all these assurances, is what will make it work. Otherwise, time is very limited. Nobody is going to take government seriously if they don't decide all these in the next 3 to 4 months, after which we will be coming pretty close to the election time and so on, and no bidders would actually come forward.
Absolutely, Mr. Pandurangi. Very tersely put. Thanks so much for joining us on Prime Time. Now, moving on, Congress President Rahul Gandhi took a dig at the BJP and Prime Minister Modi earlier today. Addressing a rally, Gandhi said that even though former Prime Minister Vajpayee had fought against the Congress, he was the first to visit him in the hospital. The Congress President also targeted the Modi government on a range of issues as he tried to enthuse the party's booth-level workers ahead of the 2019 general elections. Take a look at the highlights from this speech.
विपक्ष के एक नेता है मेरे पास, सीनियर नेता, नाम नहीं लूंगा। फंक्शन में गया था, मेरे साथ 1-2 घंटे बैठे, गाड़ी में मुझसे कहते हैं, राहुल जी, मैं 50 साल से मैं कांग्रेस पार्टी के खिलाफ लड़ रहा हूं और 50 साल बाद मुझे बात समझ आई कि कांग्रेस पार्टी ही देश की रक्षा कर सकती है और अगर बीजेपी को हराना है तो विचारधारा की लड़ाई है और बीजेपी आरएसएस की विचारधारा को सिर्फ कांग्रेस और कांग्रेस पार्टी की विचारधारा हरा सकती है। वाजपेयी जी के खिलाफ कौन लड़े थे? हम लड़े थे, मगर जब वो बीमार हैं, पहले मैं वहां गया क्योंकि मैं कांग्रेस पार्टी का सिपाही हूं। जरूर वाजपेयी जी हमारे साथ हमारे खिलाफ लड़े, मगर वाजपेयी जी ने हिंदुस्तान के लिए काम किया। आपके पास लिस्ट है, 15 लाख रुपए बैंक अकाउंट में, 2 करोड़ युवाओं को रोजगार, किसानों को सही दाम, एक तरफ, दूसरी तरफ नोटबंदी, गब्बर सिंह टैक्स, चाइना के राष्ट्रपति के साथ झूला झूलना, ढोकलाम, राफेल डील, अमित शाह के पुत्र पीयूष गोयल, लिस्ट है आपके पास। अब आप जनता के बीच में जाइए, लिस्ट निकालिए और शुरू कीजिए।
Right, those were some of the key statements that Rahul Gandhi made in his speech in Mumbai today. The one that has caught some attention from the BJP is his statement where he says he went first to meet former Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee. But he is still facing flack, especially online, for a series of statements he made yesterday where he claimed that Coca-Cola was started by someone who made lemonade. So why is it 3 steps forward and 4 steps back for Rahul Gandhi? Does he need a new script writer or a new game plan? We're going to talk a bit about that up ahead in Primetime Debate with Neerja Chaudhary and Amitabh Tiwari, both senior political commentators. But the other political story we're focusing on today, Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal continued his sit-in today at Lieutenant Governor Anil Baijal's office. He's been there since 5:30 last evening. He's doing this even as his State Health Minister Satyendra Jain began a hunger strike to press for their demands. So the demands essentially are that the Lieutenant Governor should order protesting IAS officers to end their strike and take action against them for not working for 4 months. IAS officers claim claim they haven't been on strike, but they have been unhappy with the Chief Minister and the Aam Aadmi Party following the alleged assault on the Chief Secretary at the CM's residence in February this year. Kejriwal has also accused the LG, Anil Baijal, of orchestrating the strike by IAS officers. According to Kejriwal, Narendra Modi and the LG were not allowing the Delhi government to function.
Why didn't it happen earlier? Why is it happening now? Something must have gone wrong somewhere. So you must sit down carefully and honestly discuss it out and see what are the problems, what are the complaints. Then can you solve it. You can't do it by spending a night at the house of the Lieutenant Governor and saying we are having a dharna there. It's not done. You are the Chief Minister. You're not in a small position.
मेरे समझ में नहीं आ रहा है कि दिल्ली को पानी का वादा पूरा करने के लिए क्यों नहीं आप लोग काम कर रहे हो, क्यों नहीं हंगर स्ट्राइक पे बैठ रहे हो। दिल्ली पानी के बिना चिल्ला रही है, दिल्ली अस्पतालों की व्यवस्था के लिए चिल्ला रही है, दिल्ली हवा के पोल्यूशन के लिए चिल्ला रही है, पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट के लिए चिल्ला रही है, मोहल्ले क्लिनिक में बच्चों की मौत हो रही है। इन सारे मुद्दों पे आप इन मुद्दों से ध्यान क्यों भटका रहे हो?
Some major political developments, right? People are saying things all over the country, and that's going to be prime time debate today.
We're going to start off by talking about what Chief Minister Kejriwal's game plan is. It's not the first time he's gone on strike or protesting. That is the DNA of the Aam Aadmi Party politics. What does he hope to achieve this time? We're going to have that chat right after this very, very small break. We're going to be back with Aam Aadmi Party's spokesperson, Mr. Agarwal, as well as Harish Khurana of the BJP. So do stay tuned.